whenever he was on death row and it came time to actually execute him, he waived all his rights. He didn't want an appeal. He didn't want anything. He just wanted to die. Part of me admired Larry because at least he was honest. At least he faced what he had done and knew that it was wrong. And he knew he shouldn't have killed his wife. I wasn't sure how I felt about the death penalty because I had always been raised up an eye for an eye. It doesn't matter what the guys have done. It matters that they're human beings and that they're going to be murdered. They're going to be killed by the state. We don't teach our children to, if they steal, we don't steal from our children. It took me 35 years to complete a 28-year sentence. A lot of what keeps me changed is because I do produce the prison show.
Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm in Cray in the southeast part of France, and the tower you see behind me used to be a state prison, and a quite terrible one. In 1852, 56 inmates crowded in a single cell signed a petition begging for light because they were kept in darkness all the time. Horrific, isn't it? And can you believe that today, in Texas, a few weeks before their execution, prisoners are kept under constant light 24/7? Wow. For this new episode of Death Row Stories, I interviewed David, the producer of a very special radio show. A documentary was released about this show, and I also interviewed its director. She's been working several years on that project, so I thought it would be interesting to hear what she has to say about that show. And of course, I was in the studio too, filming.
I'm Gabriella Kessler. I'm a filmmaker and editor, and I recently finished the documentary about the prison show. It's an institution. The prison show has been on the air for 45 years now. I've had so many people come up to me saying, oh, and I was one day driving on Friday night, and I heard these really intimate messages, and I didn't know what it was, and it was the prison show, and you're thrown into this world that you may have a link to or you may know nothing about. And I think because of that, it's really become part of people's lives.
I want to give a shout out to all of the women on death row. Erica, I got a notice today from your daughter who's pregnant with her list of baby things. So I got to figure out what I can afford to buy for her.
It was also the first radio show that was dedicated to prisoners and their loved ones. And because of that, I think it has a special role in people's lives.
Between January 1st and August the 28th, there were 36 suicides within TDCJ, 6 at the Telford unit alone.
It's hard to overstate the importance of the prison show for people who are behind bars in Texas. For a long time, there were no phones in prisons. So for people to communicate with their loved ones, the prison show was actually the best way. For people on death row who are even more cut off from the world, the prison show is a reminder that there are people out there who are thinking of them, who love them, who remember them. There's actually 2 women who work on the show who are known as the Texas Death Row Angels. They are in contact with people who have not heard from their lawyers, who don't get information about their cases. And so they communicate information about their death row cases to these men who wouldn't have the information otherwise. So it's not just an entertaining show, it's really important for people inside.
Kimberly Cargill, on September the 4th, Judge Schroeder denied your motion to alter judgment at the district court.
Danny, she is somebody who cares so much about the people on the inside, and she gave so much of herself, of her time, and her resources.
We do our segment every other Friday, shouting out updates for those on Texas Death Row, and we also visit. We visit a lot. We visit a whole lot. And a whole lot of prisons.
And in the studio is Francois, who does the podcast called Death Row Stories. And I guess he's filming us.
I guess he is. I would have done my hair.
David Collingsworth is the producer of the prison show. He's really amazing. He is one of the few people who works on the show who used to listen to it when he was on the inside, and he will describe what it meant to him He would listen to other people's messages and pretend that they were for him. And for him, it was really this kind of beacon of light, of something he aspired to do. The people behind bars are his brothers and sisters, and to him, it's important that they know that he hasn't forgotten them.
Whenever I first started listening to the prison show, I was amazed that anybody really cared. You're our heroes
Wow.
because you actually care and you're actually trying to change the system.
I'm going to write the FBI and tell them to put that in my file.
Now I listen to the prison show, getting ready for tomorrow.
My name's David Collingsworth. I produce the prison show on 90.1 FM KPFT. I've been there since 2004. I've been the producer since 2013, and now we're on Facebook Live, we're on YouTube, any podcast platform you can imagine, and we're on the inmate tablets on the Adovo app.
Thank you very much, David, for joining me for this interview for Death Row Stories. I wanted to interview you because you've become such an important voice for inmates and especially, of course, those on death row.
Thank you for having me.
I'm looking forward to hearing your experience and your own story. You were born in 1966, and I always start with the same question. Where did you grow up and what were your parents doing?
Well, I was born in a small town in Indiana, and my dad worked for a small gas station in the town. And my mom was, I guess she was just a housewife. And then I remember at a certain point she did get a job. So we're basically just a middle-class family from a small town in Indiana, and I'm the middle child.
And you arrive in Houston.
And it was 1978 whenever we moved here. I guess I started getting in trouble at 12 because Houston is so much different from small town Indiana. And so everybody was running around stealing and smoking weed and chasing women or girls. And so I just fell right in and got in trouble.
At 12 already?
Yeah, at 12, I guess I was burglarizing houses and chasing girls. And I said women a while ago because I had a penchant for older women. And with the older woman, I could get alcohol and I could have marijuana. I was in a lot of trouble.
Well, you started really early.
Yeah.
At one point, you will quit school. What happened exactly?
My high school girlfriend moved to Austin, Texas. And it's funny because I was in my second semester of my senior year fixing to graduate, and she moved, so I quit school and I moved too. And I moved to Austin and didn't really have a place to stay. I was staying with some folks for a while, and because I was such a knothead, of course, they kicked me out. And I had a sleeping bag and I had some clothes, and I just went and hung out where my girlfriend was hanging out at.
And how old were you then?
I was 18 years old whenever I dropped out of high school.
Your parents were not any help in this?
Well, like I said, I was a knothead, and I'd been in and out of trouble so much. I had already ran away from home, and I used to live with my girlfriend's parents, and they got tired of me being around, and I was always in trouble, so they sent her to her dad and thought that maybe her dad could get some act right out of us. But the first time I ever met her dad, I asked him if I could marry her. So I was head over heels in love with her. I didn't want to live without her.
How old was she?
She was 16, so she was younger than I, and I guess I could have gotten a lot of trouble for it. But nobody ever pressed charges, and we ended up separating for 32 years, and today she's my wife.
Today she's your wife?
Yeah, we got married about almost 9 years ago, I guess.
Wow.
And we're going to live happily ever after.
Wow, that's already an incredible story. So you had run away from your parents' house?
Yeah.
And they were looking for you? The police was looking for you?
No, everybody knew where I was. I lived down the road in some apartments with some friends of mine. I've lived with my aunt. I lived with my girlfriend's parents. Sometimes I'd go back home, but for the most part, by the time I was 16 years old, I was out of the house.
Can we say your parents didn't really care, or they?
No, I think they cared. I think I broke my mom's heart, but my mom loved me, and since most of the time she knew that I was okay, that they lived with it. And even whenever I got in trouble, went to prison, my mom was always there for me. Well, and my dad.
Before we continue your story, can you say a few words about your siblings? Did they follow a similar path?
No, my older brother was really smart. He went to Texas A&M to become a nuclear engineer, and then he met Jesus, so dropped out of A&M and went to a Bible college, and he married his high school sweetheart and became a pastor. My younger brother married a young lady that worked in Houston and got married, but he's always just worked. He's never really excelled in education, but he's excelled at keeping a job, and he's got, different people have different skill sets, and his skill set is working with his hands. And whenever he married his wife, they're still together today. So just different strokes for different folks, I guess.
Yeah, that's incredible. You've had such different lives, I guess.
Yeah.
So at one point, you took a dangerous path and you were in prison at 23. Can you tell us more about what happened?
I really didn't have any skill sets to keep a job, and it was easier to get my drugs and alcohol and pay bills by stealing and robbing. And I'd gotten so desperate at one point in time that I sat down on a street corner and I just cried out to God. And I didn't know what life held. I didn't know which way I was going. I was addicted to drugs and alcohol. Um, I had a daughter at that time at 23. I had a daughter, and my mom and dad was keeping my daughter. I couldn't raise my daughter. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't even take care of myself. So I just asked God to do whatever it took to get me out of trouble. And within 24 hours, I was going to prison, and I was telling God, "That's not what I meant," you know? But, I mean, I think that's what it took to get me out of trouble. That's what it took to open up my eyes. And it wasn't instantaneous because I was in and out of prison for many years after that. But, I mean, at least he was in my life, and I could see that, not to preach or nothing, but at least I had God in my life, and I had an opportunity.
But what took you to prison at 23?
I robbed 2 convenience stores in a stolen car, and it was all because I owed a man for some cocaine, and I was more scared of him because he carried a Uzi all the time than I was the police. So I thought, because I'd done it before, that I would just go get his money and it wouldn't be a big deal. But it ended up being a big deal because I had somebody with me, and the guy that was with me was so scared that he had released the emergency brake on the vehicle and pushed the vehicle out in the middle of the road and thought he was going to be able to jump in the window and take off. And I come out of the convenience store after robbing it, and the car was gone. And I tried taking off on foot and ended up getting in a high-speed chase and got arrested by a canine dog. And you could still see the scars on my head and on my ear where the dog chewed me up. The judge asked me if I was arrested and he gave the officer's name. I said, "No, sir, I was arrested by his dog." The guy couldn't catch me, but I couldn't get away from the dog.
But I don't understand. The guy left with his car.
Now, he pushed the car out in the road and thought that it was quicker to get in it for some reason. He was not very smart. And then he couldn't drive a standard because it was a '89 Fiero, and it had a standard transmission. And he was grinding the gears and whatnot. So by the time I finally caught up to him, I told him to get over in the passenger side, and I drove the car. But by that time, the police were there. And so they were right on our tail as we tried to get away from them. And we ended up having to ditch the car and get off on foot. And that's how we got arrested.
You got sentenced in 1990 to how many years?
Well, technically, I had 2 28s, a 10, and a 2, because I robbed 2 convenience stores in a stolen car, but I had already been to county jail and was put on 2-year parole. Not probation, it was parole, so they stacked it all on me.
Today, do you think that going to prison was something that you needed at that point of your life? Or do you think it just made things worse for you?
Well, I think it was something that I needed, but I'm not sure that I learned the first time. I was struggling with what it would take for me to get out of trouble, and even though I had returned to school and was trying to do the right things, I looked towards religion. And while I was in school, or while I was in prison the first time, I got my GED so that I had graduated high school. And then I had been going back and forth to church. I met God through AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, trying to stay sober. And the third step says that you give your life over the care of God as you understand Him. And I was struggling with, how do I understand God? What is my higher power? And so I turned to chapel, and I started going to the chapel, and became a chapel volunteer. I ended up doing a lot of those Bible studies that they send to your cell, and you can do them by the mail and send them back and forth. Well, I got offered a scholarship to obtain a Bachelor of Arts degree in pastoral counseling and theology. And so I took them up on it, and I had to study in front of the chaplain and had to go to the law library for tests. And then the church came to meet me from time to time and make sure that I was doing well and make sure I was still a volunteer. And I didn't quite graduate, but whenever I did parole out of prison, I paroled to a ministry base called Calvary Commission.
So that's in 1996 that you are released, right? Then you have to follow this religious program, right?
That was my choice. I chose to stay there for a year. I ended up being there for 14 months. But while I was there, not only did I learn how missionaries lived, but I also completed my Bachelor of Arts degree in my pastoral counseling and theology. So I really thought I was doing well, but whenever I left there, I didn't do so well.
You had your diplomas, you had followed this religious program. So we would think that you had all the good cards in your hands, but what happened?
Well, the thing about addiction is whenever you're making your own decisions, you tend to fall back on what's been safe. So even though I thought that by following God and religion, whenever I got out on my own and I left the religious facility, for lack of a better term, I started having to make my own decisions. I started having to get a job. I started, you go in a convenience store and they got beer all over the place. Meet a girlfriend. Then you fall back into what we call the ways of the world. You just rely upon their habits.
But you were sober at that time.
But I relapsed. And so once I relapsed and I started drinking and I started smoking weed and things like that, I met a young lady and she drank, and of course she liked to smoke pot. And so I started smoking pot again, and next thing you know, I'm back in trouble all over again. You got to change your habits. You can't just change your people and your places, because you change your people and your places and you haven't changed your habits. You need morals and values, and you need to know that you got to make the next right decision. If you don't make the next right decision and you stumble and you make some wrong decisions, it's easier and easier and easier just to make more wrong decisions.
So you end up going back to jail in 2000. What happened?
Well, same thing, chasing wild women and drinking alcohol and smoking pot. I ended up having a parole violation. I had some charges brought against me in Conroe, Texas. And even though the charges were dropped or they were dismissed, the simple fact that I had been arrested and that I had been drinking and I had marijuana in my system, they sent me to a place called ISF, Intermediate Sanction Facility. It's in downtown Houston, where I did 90 days.
Did you rob another convenience store or something like that?
No, I was accused of an assault case. Whenever I drink alcohol, I'm mean. And Ray Hill used to say I'm the meanest volunteer you ever met as long as I'm drinking alcohol. Alcohol just does something to me, and I like to brawl. We had went out to a pub and grub is what they call it, where it's a bar, but yet you can get food too. And I ended up getting in a fight with a guy over a pinball game. And we ran from the police, and then the woman the next morning, she went and was screaming and yelling, "Help, help, he's in my house." And the police came, and it was chaos.
Because you were in her house?
Well, because we ran from the police and she wanted to make it look like I had done something. It was all me. It wasn't her at all. And she was with me. Whenever we left the pub and grub, she's like, "Come on, let's get out of here," But she didn't want to be in trouble the next day. So she made it look like it was all me, like I had held her hostage or something, I guess. And whenever the cops come in, I'm still laid up in the bed trying to figure out what the heck's going on, But I could, in my brain, I could hear her yelling, "Help, help, he's in my house," and all this stuff. And so it was chaos.
You're back this time in prison in 2004.
Right.
What happened?
Similar thing, but I was married with a lady and living up in Bullard, Texas, and I had been working in Bullard, Texas, but I started drinking Jim Beam. And whenever I'd buy Jim Beam, it got to where I would throw the lid out the truck window and drink the whole bottle. And about every 2 weeks, I'd black out. And I was so drunk, my stepdaughter was driving the car to go pick her up from work. And we got home and we were all arguing and things were going crazy. And she went and stayed with a friend of mine. And she had been, I was cleaning my fingernails while we were at the house, the reason why she went to stay with a friend. And the phone rang, and whenever we all stepped up, I poked her in her breast with my little pocket knife I'd been cleaning my fingernails with. Well, that night, we had went to the hospital, and nobody in the hospital decided that I did it out of malicious intent, so they let us go home. But the next morning, the police showed up, and they arrested me for assault with a deadly weapon, and because my stepdaughter was there, they tried to get me for assault with a deadly weapon against a minor, and none of that had occurred, but they didn't know that, and they were going by the warrant, so they arrested me, and I went to county jail, and we ended up going to trial, and I was facing 4 life sentences, and that was the biggest scare of my life, I guess. And my wife got up and testified, and she said that she didn't understand what happened because I was standing in a room with 2 knives, and I was dancing, and she was going, hit me, sucker," and all this other stuff, and none of that ever happened. And my stepdaughter got up to testify, and she said the truth. She said, "I don't know why Mom's saying all that because that's not what happened at all." She said, "David was just drunk, and he couldn't drive, so he had been showing me how to drive, so I drove, and Mom never made me get out of the driver's seat. I drove all the way home with Mom in the back seat, and, then whenever David accidentally stabbed Mom, we all went to the hospital, and David was never mean. David never held us hostage. He never did any of that stuff." Well, the judge stopped everything and kicked everybody out of the courtroom except me and him. And he said, "Look, these women are out to get you. What are we going to do?" I said, "Well, sir, it really doesn't matter at this point. I'm going back to prison." I said, I owe about 18 years. And he said, "You're going back to prison. Why are you going back to prison?" I said, "Well, I got a parole violation." He said, "So what'd you go to prison for to begin with?" I said, "Robbery." And he said, "So you're on your way back?" I said, "Yes, sir." I said, "There's no way for me to get out of it. I violated my parole." Said, "I've been drinking and all this stuff." And he said, "So if I gave you 10 years time served, you just go back to prison on your violation?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Well, that's what I'm gonna do." So he slammed the gavel down, and the county clerk or whatever she was, she said, "Sir, you can't do that." And he said, "I'm the judge. I can do anything I want. And besides that, I already did it." And he said, "Now I just got to figure out what I'm giving him the 10 years time served for." So he looked up all my different charges, and he gave me 10 years time served for unlawful restraint, which was off of the kidnapping charge. And he said, "Miss Conrad, can you admit that maybe your wife was scared because you were drunk and acting like a fool?" I said, "Yes, sir. That's probably exactly what was going on." I said, "I don't know why she's saying all the things that didn't happen because it's just not true." And he said, "Well, that's what we're going to do. We're going to give you, it's a misdemeanor charge, but we're going to enhance it to a felony. So then that way you'll just go back on your parole violation." And then I found out a while later, a year or so later, that my wife was saying those things because Child Protective Services were trying to take her daughter away from her because she was involved with me, and they thought she wasn't telling the truth, so she had concocted these stories, and, if it wasn't for my stepdaughter, I probably would have been convicted of 4 life sentences. Instead, I went back on a parole violation, and after I got out, I made parole, and I went to see my attorney, and he thought, "Well, how are you out? Why did you get" he thought maybe I escaped or something. And, I told him, I said, "Look, it was just a parole violation." But I ended up serving 5 years on that parole violation.
And during that time, were you in touch again with your daughter?
My oldest daughter? Yeah. I've stayed in touch with my oldest daughter. We kinda skipped a little bit about daughters. In 1999, whenever I was on the run, I met a young lady, and, we had an affair, and I had another daughter. So by this time, I've got 2 daughters. And the second daughter, I wasn't really in touch with her whenever I went back to prison, but her mom was trying to tell me that I had a daughter, and I wasn't listening, and, we ended up having a paternity test and things like that, and she was trying to get money out of me. It seemed like that's all she wanted was money, and she didn't really want me to have communication with my daughter. She just wanted me to pay child support. But whenever you're in prison, you don't pay child support. You don't have any money. You don't have any income. So Indianapolis is where she was at, and Indianapolis court said that I was sentenced to $1 a week child support, but that they waived that until I got out of prison. So they understood that I wouldn't make any money, and that woman, she was just trying to get money.
Mhm. What about your first daughter? She was raised by your parents?
Yeah, and my parents brought her back and forth to see me, the whole time she was growing up. As a matter of fact, a funny story is, She came to prison one time to see me. She says, "Dad, I know you're in prison." And we had always told her that I was going to school and that I had to work for those folks, and I wasn't able to go home because I had to stay there. And I said, "Well, how do you know that I'm in prison?" She said, "I watched the Apple Dumpling Gang." And so by watching a Walt Disney movie, she had put 2 and 2 together and realized I was sitting in prison.
I don't understand.
Have you ever seen the movie The Apple Dumpling Gang?
No?
The Don Knotts, it's a comedy, and it's supposed to be funny, but they ended up going to prison. They had robbed. So my daughter was watching this comedy, a child comedy, and realized, "Wait a minute, that's my dad. That's what my dad did. My dad's in prison," you know?
Okay.
And so it gave us an opportunity to discuss, whenever you do wrong and you get in trouble, you gotta pay the penalty for it, and she knew that I hadn't really ran or did anything bad. I didn't kill nobody or nothing, but still,
Hmm.
no excuse for robbery.
So in 2007, you decide to stop drugs, to stop alcohol. I guess it's easier to do that in prison, or
Eh,
is there drugs in prison?
there's drugs and alcohol in prison, and they actually make their own alcohol. And drugs, I mean, it's not just officers and family, they drop it off. It's big money inside there. And they smoke K2, which is a synthetic marijuana, and they do have marijuana, but it's harder to get. The K2 is more widely known, but everybody makes, they call it Pruno or, um, it's just hooch. They make their own alcohol. You can make it out of potatoes or fruit or,
Wow.
like a V8 juice, which seemed to be the strongest that they ever had.
Wow, that's hard to imagine.
Yeah, it was all over the place, and I had friends of mine that would get drunk and act like a fool. I knew people that would smoke the K2 and they'd go into, like, convulsions, and and I had enough. Whenever I faced those 4 life sentences, I had told myself, "No, no more." My last drink was January 31st of 2007, and even though I was incarcerated for several years, I went to AA, I did everything I could trying to change my way of thinking. Religion hadn't worked. Cold stone, just going sober didn't work. You can stay sober, and they call that being a dry drunk because you don't change anything. You don't change your morals and values. You don't change your habits. I knew that I needed to be reprogrammed somehow. And that's what you get into. I mean, I did this time and I went to chapel services. I volunteered. I held a job. I tried to better myself any way that I could so that I was making better decisions. And no matter what, and I still tell everybody this today, make the next right decision. Because a lot of times making a right decision, it doesn't feel right because you made wrong decisions for so long. But if you mentally know that it's the right decision and you continually make it, then you'll start making right decisions and they feel right.
At that time, were you listening to the radio and to the prison show?
Originally, I heard the prison show back in 1990. And I guess I was on the Gib Lewis unit out in Woodville. And back then, you had to save up the money to buy the radio, and you had to have the headphones, and you had to have the wire that hooked it up to the wall because your antenna wouldn't work. So every Friday, I would listen to the show, and it just amazed me that somebody would care. And Ray started telling his experiences and having different people on the show that would tell their experiences or give us, an advocate, or if somebody's teaching something or tell us about new laws. And then the second hour was family members telling everybody how much they loved us and they loved their family and what they were doing in their life. And, man, I just really found it amazing that anybody would even care about us because honestly, I felt lost. I felt like maybe I'd never get out of prison.
You're being sober after 2007. And when do you get out of prison?
2010, I actually started what they call therapeutic community. And it's basically another prison, but they release you from TDCJ over to the care of the therapeutic community. And the the story behind that was I went to Miss Madeline Ortiz, who was over the rehabilitation division at that time. And because I was a trustee and I worked on air conditioning, I worked on her air conditioning at her house. And I asked her, I said, "Can I go to the Kyle unit?" And she said, "Mr. Collingsworth, after all this time, you've been incarcerated 5 years now." She said, "Don't you think you can stay sober in the free world?" I said, "No, ma'am, I don't." I said, "I'm really scared that I'm going to relapse again and come back." I said, "This is my third time to prison on the same crime, but yet every time I get out, somehow or another, I relapse. I make the bad decisions, and I end up back in prison. I don't ever want to come back to prison again. And she says, "Well, what makes you think that the Kyle unit's the answer?" I said, "Because it's behavior modification. It's going to train me to think differently. It's going to teach me to recognize my thinking errors. It's going to change me." And I was what they call a peer educator. And I taught people in prison about STDs and STIs and safe prison, how to conduct themselves in prison without getting in trouble and without getting raped or beat up or whatever. So she approved me to go to the Kyle unit, which was therapeutic community. But she also put something in my file because they made me an education coordinator. And what that meant was I had to teach people how to stay sober. And I thought to myself, my God, I don't know how to stay sober. How am I going to teach people how to stay sober? But I had a book, and the book was about therapeutic community. I had been studying on it. And in the book, it said that it was a game. And it gave all the rules to the game, and it told us what we were supposed to do to play this game. And the theory behind therapeutic community was after you play the game for so long, it forms different habits. It makes you think differently. It makes you accept society. If you see somebody doing something wrong in society, you recognize that it's wrong and you do something about it. You either go tell somebody or you say something to them or whatever the case is. It just changes your way of thinking. And so I presented that idea to all the guys in therapeutic community, and I said, "Hey, man, look, I got this book, and this book said that this place is designed to be a game." And I said, "If we want all of our privileges, we need to play the game." I said, "We keep the police out of our business. We keep the counselors out of our business. They'll all think we're programming, and they'll leave us alone." Well, a lot of people in that prison would end up being on lockdown, and they wouldn't have commissary privileges. And we were always watching TV and laughing and joking. And when the counselors come around, we would look like we were programming because we were playing the game. Part of the game was you get in a circle, you write tickets on each other, and then you get in a circle and you confront people over their behaviors. Well, we would wink at each other and we'd laugh and we'd talk smack in the circle. And what the guys didn't realize and that it works. After you play the game for so long, it becomes second nature. You automatically see people doing wrong. You recognize their behaviors in you, and you start changing your behaviors because you don't want to be like that guy or whatever, you know. And I got out of therapeutic community in 2011, but they made me go to a halfway house. And I think by the time I got out of the halfway house, it was probably 2012 before I finally got out. But life's been different since then. Life's been a lot different.
What happened? You became a pastor, right?
I had completed my Bachelor of Arts degree whenever I was back at Cavalry Commission. And I went to a place this time after I got out of the halfway house to a place called Spirit Key Incorporated, which was a faith-based transitional work center. And I taught Bible studies and I taught AA. I became a chaplain. They actually ordained me as a chaplain. And I started living the life. I started being real, I guess, because you have to be honest. In order to be real, you have to be honest, especially with yourself.
And you find a job?
I got a job offer with a company, Planet Fitness. And the guy sent me a text one day because I was working on my own. I called it a handyman service. And trying to pay bills, paying child support, different things like that. And he sent me a text one day and he said, "I hear you're a really good handyman." I said, "Yes, sir. I can fix just about anything." He said, "Well, what all you work on?" I said, "Probably be easier to tell you what I don't work on than what I do work on." He said, "Well, could you handle maintenance at Planet Fitness?" And I said, "Well, which one?" He said, "All of them." And I was amazed because at the time, I guess they had 6 in Houston. And I thought that was a really big deal. And I guess for an ex-convict, that is a really big deal. And I went and had the interview and I got the job.
You also got involved in the prison show. With what did you start there?
Well, originally I started with Ray Hill, bringing him a Diet Dr. Pepper. And I thought, the guy just wants a Diet Dr. Pepper. He's just going to be thirsty. But really, he was assigning me a duty. And my duty, come find out, he was teaching me timing because if I brought that Diet Dr. Pepper early, he'd drink it before the end of the show and he'd clown me on the air. And I didn't like being clowned on the air, and he knew that. And so if I brought it late, then he'd clown me on the air because I didn't do my job on time. And if I opened it in the studio where it could be heard over the air, of course, he'd clown me again. And anybody that knows Ray knows he really clowns you. I mean, he clowns you pretty hard. So I would bring that Diet Pepper just right, and then after I got the Diet Dr. Pepper down pat, then he asked me to do different news stories or, different little bits and pieces. Sometimes if there weren't any guests in the room, he'd ask me just to come in there so we could talk over these things to kind of bounce things back and forth or jug at each other, make jokes. And, so I just got to where, Ray Hill became like my mentor. He became the guy I looked up to.
So you started like this, and now you're the producer of this show. Tell us about this job. What exactly does it mean to be the producer of such a show?
Well, the show has certain morals and values that we take care of, and it's my job to kind of keep it going as Ray's dream was. I mean, it's not a religious show, so even though I'm a pastor or a chaplain, I don't put God in everything that we do at the prison show. I don't want to exclude anybody. The first hour is about cops, courts, jails, programs guys and gals can use to get out and stay out. I give platform to different advocates that are actually making a difference. Then the second hour is what made us famous. It's about the shout outs. It's about your family trying to keep a connection going on. Families can't always drive all the way across Texas just to see you or to see the inmates or the incarcerated population. And so that way they have a platform and they can call it and say, "Hey, Johnny, I can't come see you this week, but we'll come see you next week. And by the way, I put some money on your books. Just make sure that you use it wisely." And it gives them hope. It gives them communication. They can hear their loved one's voice.
Mm.
I could make shout outs for them all day long, but they don't want to hear my voice. They want to hear their mom's voice, or they want to hear their dad's voice, or their kid's voice. For years Ray had these 3 girls that would come on and they would sing "You Are My Sunshine." And I got to where every Friday night I was tuning in because I wanted to hear what was going on in young ladies' lives. I got to hear those young ladies grow up, and they went off to college, and now they've got kids, and I mean, it's just a big part of the show. They would sing "You Are My Sunshine" to their dad, and, their dad wrote me not too long ago. I got a letter from him, and every now and then, they don't come on the show anymore. Very often do they come on the show, but grandma stays in touch, and the kids they're grown, and they got families of their own now. I mean, it's just been so many years, so.
At that time, could inmates on death row listen to the show?
Yeah, at that time, Ray would actually go in and interview, and they've actually had some shows way back whenever there were other inmates that were able to go into death row and do interviews, and they did interviews and visitation, and it was just different a long time ago. Nowadays, the inmates on death row are the main ones that can hear us because if they're using the radio, we've only got about a 100-mile radius. And so the guys at Polunsky were the main audience for a long time. And then general population at Polunsky started listening. And there are some other units around that would hear us on the radio, but now everybody can hear us.
And why is this show so special to the guys on death row?
Well, I think it's because of the shout outs. I think it's because they actually get to hear their families. Um, on death row, they can't touch their family. They can't touch anybody. And so just to hear your mom call up and hear your mom's voice or like I was talking about the little girls, if you have young children and they get to be on the show, you can actually hear your family's voices. It makes the experience more humane. And that's one of our goals at the prison show is to actually make the incarcerated experience more humane.
When you were producing that show, there was someone that you knew that was on death row.
Whenever I was in trouble in the Conroe area and actually went to jail in Conroe, I was actually incarcerated with Larry Hayes and Larry Swearingen.
Can you tell his story?
Well, Larry Hayes, his wife was having an affair, or he thought his wife was having an affair with another guy. And the other guy's wife thought they were having an affair. It was kind of common knowledge. Everybody was arguing and fighting about it. Well, Larry Hayes's wife and her boyfriend decided they were going to take a polygraph test to prove that they weren't having an affair. And they both passed the polygraph test. But the wife said, "But how could he pass it? That's not true. And I'm sitting here thinking, when Larry's telling me the story, I'm thinking, but that was the goal, was to prove they weren't having the affair. But because she said that, Larry went and got his .44 and loaded it up, and he shot her and several times, and actually stopped to reload his weapon before he left the house. And he went to a convenience store to steal a car, and he took the young lady from the convenience store and she brought him outside to his car, and he shot her. And I guess he went to another truck stop somewhere. He had stolen a Blazer, and the Blazer needed a jump start, and he ended up having a shootout with the cops, and he got shot, and he was pretty bad shape whenever I met him. And he seemed like a really nice guy, but he had so much remorse over the things that he had done. And whenever Larry was facing the death penalty, he welcomed it. He just thought that he was the worst person that could be on the face of the earth, and he knew that he had ruined his relationship with his children, and he tried to apologize to the children, but I don't think they were trying to hear it. And whenever he was on death row and it came time to actually execute him, he waived all his rights. He didn't want an appeal. He didn't want anything. He just wanted to die. And part of me admired Larry because at least he was honest. At least he faced what he had done and knew that it was wrong. And he knew he shouldn't have killed his wife. And the worst thing he did that he thought was that he had taken his children's mother away from him. He didn't really care what happened to him at that point. He just knew that what he had done was so wrong for his children that the only way he could make it right was to be off the face of the earth. And I was locked up with that guy. I mean, we were all in the same cage. It was weird because we had separate cells, and then they had a day room. So during the day, we'd all take our mattresses and go to the day room because we knew we'd be in the day room all day. And Larry Hayes and I would just lay on the floor while the TV was going on, old westerns or something, and we'd talk about all this stuff. And I I I think he was a good person. And I think he made some very bad decisions. And the reason why the courts gave him the death penalty was because he actually had enough sense to reload the weapon. So he was making a conscious decision to further kill more people besides just the wife. So the wife probably could have been a crime of passion, but everybody after that was, and that's why they gave him the death penalty
And during your show, you talked about Larry Hayes, of course.
quite often. And there were things that came up, and I had wrote an article about Larry because he hit home so much. I mean, I could see some of the decisions he was making and why he made them, and it made sense to me. And I don't know that anybody should ever deserve to die, but he wanted to die. He felt like that was the right thing to do, and maybe the only way he could make it up to his kids. And I'm not sure that it did make it up to him because now they're without their mom and dad. But at least he thought he was making the right decisions.
Every 15 days, you have the Death Row Angels in your show. Can you tell us a few words about them?
Well, the Death Row Angels they're special ladies. They really have compassion and love for all the guys that are on death row, and I think they'd do anything for the guys that are on death row. And they spend their own time and money running up and down the highways, going through visitation. Sometimes putting money on their books if they need the money on their books, or even buying. I've seen them either buy the grave or get up the money so that they would have an actual grave where they don't have to be buried at TDCJ. But they have love and they have compassion. And to them, it doesn't matter what the guys have done. It matters that they're human beings and that they're going to be murdered. They're going to be killed by the state. We don't teach our children to. If they steal, we don't steal from our children. Or if our children bites us, do we just go and take a chomp out of them? I mean, it doesn't make any sense that somebody kills somebody and that they go and they kill them too. And the ladies just take so much time and effort to make sure that those guys know that they're human and that they're loved and that somebody really cares about them. And a lot of times their crime could be horrendous, but the amount of time that they spend on death row, they're a completely different person by that time. And the ladies just really care so much. The ladies care so much that not only do they go to the visitation, not only do they send them all their legal work, but then whenever they're executed, they go there to protest the execution and to make sure that the guys know that there's somebody outside rooting for them in one form or fashion. Sometimes they even go in and they witness the execution because that person doesn't have anybody in their family that would actually be there enough to care for them, and that maybe that's the last face they get to see is someone who cares for them. That gives them hope. It gives them strength.
And for you, it's important to have the Death Row Angels in your show?
Yeah, I think they're a big part of our show. I mean, they're 2/3 of the show, believe it or not. Out of all the volunteers we've had over the years, right now there's only really 3 of us that stay there, and now we've recently got a camera guy, so I guess there's 4. But the Death Row Angels, um, Danny is our hostess, and Miss Linda, she answers the phones, and, if we have guests that come up, and Miss Linda's even brought them to her home and let them stay in her home, and our camera guy, stays, with Miss Linda now. Yeah, we needed a camera guy, and we kept advertising for somebody to come take care of the cameras, and, uh, and now this fella stepped up and volunteered, but he didn't know how he was gonna get back and forth, and wherever he was staying at, he couldn't stay there very much longer, and Miss Linda says, "Well, you can stay with me," and, that's just how much they care, and they don't judge anybody. I mean, if you're good with them, they're good with you.
Do people sometimes tell you that you spend a lot of time for bad guys?
Yeah, yeah, a lot of people. Ray said publicity is publicity, so we get a lot of guys that come on our Facebook page and they call us and they prank call us and different things, and they can't believe how we could care about guys on death row. He's a baby killer or whatever, they call him, and they're just so amazed that we care about them and we give them a platform or we tell their story or whatever the case is. And I get it. A lot of people hurt people, and, it's my wife's uncle had been murdered, and so whenever we first got back together, she didn't understand how I could do the radio show, but she began volunteering for a while at the radio show, and then she got to understanding our side of things. It's a give and take, and even though she doesn't come there all the time, she understands I go there because I can't put up a sign that says that's a dead end road without being there. I mean, somebody needs to know that's not the road to go down. You're making bad decisions. You're going to end up murdered. It's different. It's not the same.
Maybe we can say that Danny, one of the death row angels, fell in love with an inmate. Did it impact the show somehow?
Well, I know at her execution, his execution, she was actually there, and she got to go over to the church to actually be with him. I think that was the only time she got to touch him. It changed some things within her, but at that time, um, she was just part of the Death Row Angels. She wasn't actually our host. I think Hank Lane was still our host at the time. But it changed things within the whole show because we got to see what the immediate family members go through and what the wives or the girlfriends get to go through. Danny, not only did Danny fall in love with him whenever he was executed, but Danny's also a victim. So Danny's been on both sides of the prison show, and that's why she's so involved with the prison show.
Did your look on death row changed through the years?
Yeah, whenever I started listening to the prison show, and even whenever I started volunteering, I wasn't sure how I felt about the death penalty because I had always been raised up to an eye for an eye, and that if the guy was so terrible in society that yeah he needed to be put down, he needed to be put to death. I mean, if we have an animal, you have a rabid dog that's going around biting everybody, you put him out of his misery and you put him down so he doesn't hurt anybody else. But I didn't realize that there's a lot of people on death row that are innocent. A lot of people that maybe they've committed other crimes, but they didn't particularly do that one. Maybe they didn't kill anybody. You got the law of parties. Just because some guy's there, he didn't kill anybody, but yet he's going to be convicted just like the killer did. It's not right. It's not fair. Um, it breaks my heart. In particular, Cameron Todd Willingham. Uh, his sister wrote me, and I had been in communication with him. I don't believe that Cameron caused that fire. I think that something else caused that fire.
Say a few words about this case. People can watch also the movie called Trial by Fire, which is a very compelling movie. And can you say a few words about it?
Well, Cameron Todd Willingham's house caught on fire, and his wife and kids were burned to death. And the authorities arrested him and said that he started the fire and laid down and went to sleep. Now, why would anybody start a fire and lay down and go to sleep? And you expect to kill your family because possibility he could have died too. But I just the science that they used to determine the fire and to convict him on was determined as junk also. it seems like there's a lot of junk science that's going around and people are getting convicted over. I just really don't think that he did it, and they never did. The state of Texas never did declare Todd, that he was innocent, but they did have, there was a note in the prosecutor's notes where he didn't feel like he did it, and they also had some expert witnesses that come up and testify that there's no way that he did it. But yet they executed him, and it's too late after all these people decide, "Hey, we don't think he did it." It's too late, you done killed him. So I was always raised up where it was you're supposed to be beyond a shadow of a doubt before you're convicted, and there's so much doubt. Rodney Reed, how much doubt's there? The prosecutor, the arresting officer, withheld evidence in his garage for over a year, and then all of a sudden this stuff comes forward. I mean, it's just there's so much hanky-panky going on with evidence and everything. There's no way Rodney should be on death row. I mean, if Rodney's guilty of anything, I mean, he did a lot of other crimes. That don't mean he needs to be murdered over it. And so many people have already declared that he's innocent, and there's no way he did it. But yet, Ken Paxton and everybody else want to keep him on death row. It's just ridiculous. Texas is being ridiculous.
Let's end this interview coming back to your personal story. Can you tell us what happened in February 2025?
Well, February 16th of 2025, I actually discharged parole. I was convicted January 20th of 1990. And because I was such a knothead and I went in and out so many times, it took me 35 years to complete a 28-year sentence. But this time getting out, my life has changed. And I think a lot of what keeps me changed is because I do produce the prison show. I'm giving back. Every week I have a reminder, and I'm able to tell other people how to make the next right decisions. I've been out 15 years this time. And I just recently went through some major stuff in my life. I didn't relapse. I didn't start drinking. I didn't beat up on my wife. I mean, my life has changed. And whenever I discharged my parole February 16th, 2025, my parole officers called me Mr. Collingsworth. I mean, they respected me, and they knew that I was one of the good guys. I mean, I had changed, and I really deserved to be. And I honestly, I never thought I would make 15 minutes, let alone 15 years, and to actually be able to discharge parole. Now I don't have to pee in a cup. I don't have to go visit anybody. I don't have to give anybody any money against my will. I can actually just finish living my life, and it's really special. But I still want to live it the way I've been living it, by producing the prison show and helping others and doing the things that I can do to stop recidivism.
Is there a big impact? I mean, now you can move and live anywhere, something like that?
Even on parole, you can go anywhere in the state of Texas that you want, but if you want to leave the state, you have to get permission. They say after 5 years of being out, you can actually have a gun on your property. You can't have a gun driving around anywhere or whatever, but you can have a gun on your property. And my wife and I have 10 acres. So, I mean, we have bobcats and mountain lions and coyotes, and there's a reason to have a gun on a property, on a piece of property that big. But honestly, there's a part of me that was kind of scared, because I'm been sober now 18 years. And it was like, well, it would be nice to roll a doobie and sit out on the back porch and smoke one. I haven't done it, but the thoughts have occurred, because I'm like, well, what happens if I smoke that doobie and then I relapse and I start drinking all the time? I start selling all my stuff to try and go get more dope, and then I become that bad guy that's sitting in the beer joint and wants to start fighting everybody because somebody's being too loud. Yeah, I'm not gonna smoke the doobie now. I mean, I can. I'm not on parole anymore. I'm not gonna have the same consequences. But it was kind of scary, because it was like, well, what am I gonna do now? I mean, there's nobody standing over me to keep me sober. And then it dawned on me, yeah, I'm here. I keep me sober.
Last question. What's your relationship today with your daughters?
Both of my daughters really love me. As a matter of fact, there's a tradition on a motorcycle. You get a little bell, and the little bell's supposed to keep you safe. And my youngest daughter sent me a bell. You're not supposed to buy it yourself. Somebody's supposed to give it to you as a gift. And my youngest daughter sent me a bell that says #1 dad. She's 22, 23 now. I'd have to sit and do the math. But like, she still sends me pictures, like with her and her cat, or out of the blue, I'll get a text and I'll look at it and she's sticking her tongue out at me. Man, how many dads can say that that happens, you know? And my older daughter, her and I text back and forth, and just not to give up my daughter or tell tales out of school, but my older daughter lives in Oregon, and she likes to smoke a lot of weed. And the other day I was mowing grass, and there's a little weed plant in my yard. I don't smoke weed. I don't know how this little weed plant got out here, but I didn't mow it over. I sent her a picture of it because I knew she'd like it. It's just a little baby weed plant in my yard. And she has ups and downs, but we text back and forth. And she made a post the other day that if she could choose her dad, she would choose me all over again. We're close and we love each other. And after all these years, it really is a blessing because I thought, especially whenever she come tell me about the apple dumpling gang, I really felt like I had let her down. And she still loves me today, so it's really special.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with Death Row Stories today, David. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for watching. I hope you found this interview interesting. Please, I need more subscribers, so continue to share, to comment. I appreciate this. Thank you.
Now I listen to the prison show. Getting ready for tomorrow. Those bars won't screw my mind. I'm still this little kid